Hello, everybody. Welcome to the old Smile Back in CloudRadial webinar. We're going to give everybody a second to roll in here because I know it takes a little bit to get going. In the meantime, how about instead of looking at this face, I'll share a PowerPoint. That'll set the mood. How's that? Andrew, can you see that okay? Is that cool?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
cool.
Looks good.
All right. I basically wait for the number to go above like 5 people, which we're well past that. So I think we can get started. Let me introduce, right? So we are Riccardo Cecchini. That's me. I'm the director of product service here at CloudRadial, aka fancy way of saying training guy, professional services guy, support guy. I do kind of do it all. I basically am here to explain stuff away and help people use CloudRadial, which is a client portal. And then with me, of course, is Andrew Wallace, the managing director of Smileback. Andrew, what more or less do you do over there at Smileback?
Do I do or does Smileback do?
What do you do at Smileback? And we'll talk about Smileback.
Yeah, so I do a bit of everything as the managing director. I'm also the chief product officer. So the core of my focus is on the product and customer side of the business, because that's the core of what we do at Smileback is first and foremost, focus on the customer, and second, focus on product. And the two are obviously related. But yeah, for those, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on the call are familiar with us. We've been around for a while now. So we've been in the game for 5 years, and we're a customer satisfaction system specifically for MSPs and IT service providers. We're focused exclusively on the customer feedback piece. We go both wide and deep on it, and we've helped more than 1,000 MSPs over the course of our time in the game, and with PSA connections across ConnectWise, Autotask, Kaseya, and then we have a whole bunch of other supporting integrations like the one we have now with you guys, CloudRadial.
Yeah, and that's really what this is about for everyone joining us. We're going to talk about what the deal is, both with the integration, but more so like everything from like a little bit of the nitty gritty. So we're going to talk about the technicalities of how it's set up and whatnot. And we're also just going to talk about why it exists, like why we have a partnership, what it really aims to do, and kind of, again, how do you capitalize on that? Hence the title, Capitalizing on Client Feedback. Hey, so let's go to the next one. So I'm going to do a little bit about my spiel, right? For those that don't know, in case you're joining in and you're like, what is this webinar? Sounds cool. I'll sign up. Maybe, right? We are a SaaS provider, right? So we're a SaaS solution rather for MSPs, and we're doing, again, the easiest way to kind of put that out there is a client portal. And now it does a lot of stuff, right? Everything from a intranet that you would be able to deliver to your clients, all the way to a account management tool, a reporting tool, kind of an aggregate, right? You're true, and I know it's kind of overused, but like your one-stop shop, your single pane of glass. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to put your clients in one place and get access to everything. And again, as a client portal, our job is not to deliver literally everything, right? We're not going to be your best reporting tool of this. We're trying to make everything work together. So in this specific webinar, of course, we're looking at the CSAT, and we're going to partner with the best people out there, the people that have their stuff down, like Andrew and Smileback, to really make that work. So obviously it's all going to be branded to you. It's going to look real pretty. It's going to really kind of enhance your client experience. As we say now, we're starting to kind of mouth the words. It's going to be your ultimate client experience to really drive that part home, and really the name of the game with everything. And again, it's going to be a core theme of this webinar, but really kind of everything we do is transparency, is giving people on-demand access to see stuff. And again, not just because that's a good thing to do, which it is, but we're going to talk about how to capitalize that. And how does that differentiate you? How does that change what you deliver? How does that turn your stack into an actual product as, like, you know, what you guys deliver as a brand? So I know Andrew already said it, but we'll go through it a little bit more, right? We have a little bit about Smileback too. I don't know if you missed anything here, because I think you got it all. Obviously, you guys are a big name in the game of CSAT, like one of the biggest, I think, if not the biggest. I personally know a ton of people have Smileback, and so much so that I'll get this out of the way too. When we first started CloudRadial, we have a built-in CSAT tool, and the amount of times people are like, just integrate with Smileback, just integrate with Smileback, we're going to use Smileback. It's like, dude. And now that we have people like, thank you, you do it now. It's like, okay, cool, we got it. We finally did it. But yeah, so lots of
thank you for integrating with us.
We have to thank the developers. I get to tell people, it's like, we really should have that, and then I send it off to Jeff and co. But yeah, and I don't think we missed anything here, but because again, we did a little bit of this intro. But what I really wanted to frame today, and for those that have watched a webinar with CloudRadial before, I kind of hate the PowerPoint bit to it, so I'll try to stay off this as quick as possible. I just want to set the tone. The importance today of what we're talking about is just the gist of client feedback, right? So again, a little bit of the strategy with a little bit of the technicality. We're going to hit these three main points, right? Client loyalty, of course. We want to make sure that people are heard. We want to make sure that the stickiness of the client is there. We want to make sure that that is as easily accessible as possible. Obviously, the client experience is huge. More and more that term gets dropped these days. IT is slowly, not slowly, actually kind of quickly becoming one of the forefront industries that is starting to understand how you can take a client experience and really make it a central theme. Being service-based, obviously, that's super important. So we're going to talk about the ramifications of that. And then lastly, for those that are more analytical, we're going to talk about the literal analytics of how to manage and measuring these things to turn them into anything from KPIs to to-dos and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think, again, Smileback being as in-depth as they are is going to be really, really key for this. Because again, CloudRadial being a client portal can do it, but the extra oomph comes from a tool that is dedicated to doing that. So let's do this too. So let's talk a little bit about capturing feedback. Again, I don't really want to spoon feed these. I want to just kind of chit chat about this for a second with you, Andrew. So in terms of capturing feedback, we kind of wrote down there's kind of three main points that I think and we think as CloudRadial that are pretty good. Obviously, to really do it properly, we want to be effective. We want to have it be established. We want to make sure that it's accurate, and then we want it to be standardized. So like one of the questions I get, this might be a little bit of a curveball, that I get all the time is like, how do you know what to capture? How do you serve it up? And like, we have a couple different ways, but like in Smileback, you can put it on the website, you can do all that stuff. How do you drive the feedback? Is that all from emails? Is that from a web widget? Like, where do you get it from?
Yeah, so it depends on whether you're, at least with Smileback, but I think more broadly in the space, the two main surveys that are used are CSAT, so customer satisfaction, and that's very pervasive in the industry, and then NPS, Net Promoter Score, which is emergent, let's say, and has certainly been used a lot more in the B2C space, is starting to be used a lot more in the B2B space, and is a particularly important score when we're talking about like mergers and acquisitions and kind of big dollars, private equity, but now is being used by MSPs and in really good ways in order to understand the nature of their client relationships. And so CSAT is typically, you want it to be served at the end of a transaction. And so what we typically do with what we do with Smileback through our integrations with the PSA platforms is at the close of every ticket, the MSP user sends the customer satisfaction survey, which most people have seen, which is just 3 smiley faces, positive, neutral, negative. And so that's delivered. It could be by email, but it's effectively delivered by the PSA to the end user, however that's done. And then they have the opportunity to add a testimonial, a comment through a web form. And then, so that's CSAT. It's very basic, very simple. And then it's all about what you do with that is the power and the functionality. NPS is typically delivered to clients through an email. In Smileback, we use a concept called campaign, but there's many other ways of doing this in the industry, both from other providers who are like us, who serve the MSP market, or more broadly with companies who are doing NPS. And people would have probably also seen NPS sort of thrown on websites they've been at. Maybe they bought a pair of shoes from Adidas, and then for some reason they got an NPS survey right at the end of it. I like to say that companies are carpet bombing the internet with these surveys. And that's one way to do it. It's one way to get data. A smarter, more established way, so in a more standardized way, which makes the data more powerful, is to do it on a campaign basis in terms of like a frequency to a specific segment. And email is probably the best way to do that.
Yeah, and good, right? I basically wanted to draw the distinction out between CSAT and NPS in general, because as we talk about this, right, obviously this webinar is talking about capitalizing on feedback in general. We were talking about this right before the call in the practice session. We're saying like the audience of this call. So those that might be watching, you might already be using CSAT. You might be thinking about using CSAT, and how does that fit into the whole thing? And I think based off what Andrew was saying, based off what we're saying here, I think the key to it in general, before we talk about the actual use cases of it, is what he was saying is like, what is your process for it? Do you have a standardized flow? Is it effective? Is it easy to leave feedback? And if you don't have that, we kind of can't get to the other stuff. So I think even building that out, right, going, okay, again, in your closed tickets, throwing the HTML template in there, giving them that stuff, that sets the precedence for the effective, easy thing to do at scale, right? Automation is obviously huge for most people. Most MSPs I talk to, obviously they vary in size. They don't have the luxury of reaching out to everybody one by one and saying, was it good? Did we do good? Could we do better? What is it? So it's in everyone's best interest, I think, small one-man shops all the way to enterprise to implement some form of feedback gathering. But again, the last 2 points, to establish it and standardize it, is the key to move on to the next point. Because again, the most important thing for people that they need to get is the actionability. Like once you capture the feedback, what are you doing with it? And if you don't know what you're doing with it, you might just be spinning your wheels. So the majority of this webinar is going to be talking about that. It's going to be talking about how to turn that feedback into an actionable plan, making it something that you can take and go, okay, we've got the, if we want to talk return on interest or ROI on it, we certainly can. And again, we kind of put our heads together and put together these kind of 3 main points just to keep the theme consistent on what that helps, right? And we came up with the client relationships, obviously for marketing and sales is really good. And then just for your own internal operations. So take a quick sec to talk about these. So for client relationships, we put up their KPIs, metrics, reporting, and talking points. Now with Smileback, right? When you collect these, what does that look like? Can you show these to your clients natively in Smileback? Is there a reporting function? Because I honestly have not spent as much time in there as I should. So you're going to tell me on the call live, please.
Yeah, that's okay. And Linwood, right, actually put a Q&A and a chat to exactly this point. I'm not sure if it's for Smileback or for CloudRadial. It could be for either or both. But yeah, so we've built out over time quite a set of reporting tools that can generate reports that, yeah, you can show your client, you can send to your client, you can do it on, QBRs, quarterly business reviews is a concept that some MSPs have adopted, and it can be pretty effective there to include in that report. So both in the report that you give to the client and the discussion in the meeting itself, to use both the feedback as a framework. So here's the score. Hopefully you had a target that you'd already established with that specific client or with all your clients for perhaps MPS or MPS CSAT or both. And then also the testimonials. And depending on how big you are as a company, how diverse your client base is, you might want to break it down by segments. But why it can be really important in terms of framing and why we've built that as actually a product feature in Smileback is that you want to eliminate what I call like the radio call-in phenomenon. So by having a framework, by returning to the same thing every quarter, by knowing those scores, you can eliminate perceptions that are erroneously positive or erroneously negative. The negative is obviously the worst, but you can really imagine where there's one recent or recency bias around one bad thing happened. You got a negative CSAT score because a tech didn't do something, and that colors the entire quarter, which is ridiculous because maybe you have a 99 CSAT score where your techs are killing it. You have an NPS of 80, so you're best in class in terms of NPS. You're providing the product services. You're doing the good account management, and so you don't want that data to be skewed.
Right.
And so that's how we try to do that with the reporting piece. And it's actually something also on our roadmap to Linwood's question around building more automation, because with Smileback right now, there is a bit of effort that needs to be done by the MSP user to generate those reports. And what we've realized that would make the MSP more likely to use the reporting, to more likely to use it effectively, is to be able to do this on a set it and forget it basis, to generate these reports and just spit them out to all the clients or to all their account managers or whomever. And so that's something we're working on making even more robust.
Yeah, and I want to talk to that for a second, because like I said, I want to kind of deviate from the PowerPoint for a little bit, because again, I want to speak to these points. We're going to talk about these again for the majority of the rest of the call, but I wanted to take a sec to look at CloudRadial, right? Because the goal of this webinar, again, is not just to say, what does either platform do and cool, like think about how they can work together, is to actually show you. So just a little bit of technicality, right? Obviously, this is available whenever you feel like it, 24/7, but in our support site, which is just support@cloudradial.com, is our documentation. And you can also find the same article, I believe, on Smileback, just talking about how our integration works together and how we're going to take exactly what Andrew was saying, which is like the main point that I took away that I see a lot of personally, that I talk to a lot of people, is that point that you said about like one bad apple can taint the whole thing, right? It's like especially the concept of like, what have you done for me lately? really sucks, especially if you got like one problem user and they're the ones that just keep putting negative stuff and everybody else is positive, but that one person just wakes up on the wrong side of the bed and they just go, go, go. So first things first, right? The way that we get CloudRadial and Smileback to talk to each other is, again, within CloudRadial, we're basically leveraging an API connection, right? So there's a whole thing of creating that API and pasting it in there, which is like pretty standard for most connections. But what's happening is actually as the feedback is fired, it is two-way, right? Whether they log it from within CloudRadial or whether they log it within Smileback, the whole point is that the feedback, especially if you're using the client portal as a centralized hub, regardless of where it was logged, it makes it back into CloudRadial, right? So long story short, this is the specific instructions on how to set that up, how to set the webhooks up and all that good stuff. What you're going to end up with is obviously a portal. And I was telling Andrew before, I'm not going to turn this into CloudRadial hour and just show you all this. The focus here is on showing that feedback. So at a raw, like just show me the feedback level, most likely the point of contact or somebody with higher level administrative access, not your everyday user, would be able to see the feedback specifically that's coming into the portal, right? So they were able to see more or less the gist of the situation. But like Andrew was saying, how do they get a fair shake about what's really going on? So like this is fine, right? They have the breakdown reviews of like what was happening at a very simple UI level, right? They were able to see this whenever they want. But turning that into an actionable plan, especially when it comes to the QBR, talking about how it can, either make or taint the relationship, we want to try to visualize that even better than this, which we do, right? What CloudRadial is going to do is it takes the feedback that is input into it. And then you've got a couple different ways to serve it. Again, we're looking at this like this, which may be fine. What most people tend to go to as part of their feedback review during the QBR reviews of any type is there's a native dashboard in CloudRadial. So the dashboard in CloudRadial can be used to pull in pretty much whatever. I mean, we have a lot of native things ourselves from our agent, from a PSA connection, from this or that, but also visualizing the feedback itself. There is a widget for feedback. And these dashboards we're looking at here are part of the sample set. So you would actually have these too. So something like this might be a practical explanation, right? This is obviously a horrible example because I put a lot of negative feedback for kicks myself, but basically this is an example of like what you might have something to talk about with the client, right? You're able to say like, look, last year we didn't do so hot, right? Let's figure that out. Let's talk about why that is. Now, obviously, the client has the ability to drill down into their own portal whenever they want. And that speaks to that transparency. But this is kind of what I was mentioning before, in that if you have something that you genuinely want to use and talk about as a client relationship point to make sure that you kind of are on the same page, you have the ability within the portal to make that part of the action plan. It's not just a list of feedback going, here's the numbers. 16 positive, 13 negatives. What are we going to do about it? It's saying, okay, what went wrong? What happened, right? To what was the feedback related? What ticket was that related to? Let's take a look at that, right? And having that experience built in to the portal where they can see that at any given point is really strong, because that speaks to the experience. And again, it turns that conversation that might have ordinarily been, well, I guess you guys suck because in the past 3 months, everything's been negative, to, you know why you've been giving me negative? Because it turns out that you're frustrated that this one thing is happening. What's the cause of that? Let's turn to fix that, right? It really elevates the discussion from just a positive, medium negative. So I personally have seen this, and I'm sure you have too, as you were saying. This is huge for drawing forth a conversation. And ultimately, again, I won't harp too much about this, but when it comes to the QBR, the idea, especially in CloudRadial, is to be able to generate an action plan from that. So obviously there's going to be objectives in general, whether it's projects or whatever, but showing the client that you're listening and you're actually getting ahead of it and being proactive with the feedback and answering that is really big for them, right? Because they can see that. And on your side of things, obviously, again, you can view the feedback for one given company at a time. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see digital efforts up here. I can see all the feedback log for them. I can see the dashboards and whatnot, which is cool. But also as the MSP managing this at scale, right? We obviously, both Andrew and I, we don't know if you're going to have one client or 1,000 or 10,000 or, who knows. So you also want to be able to think that like all this stuff should be as scalable as possible. So again, you kind of focus on it one by one. You set up those automations we set up earlier, we talked about earlier, right? Whether that's in the email template or within the portal itself. And when you're ready to review this as an MSP, not just for the individual client, CloudRadial is also going to give you the ability to do that at a global scale. So you can see all the feedback for everybody. So much so that you can also start breaking down not just who left what, but like what's the overall company scores over a certain time. You're gonna have to forgive me because this demo counts a little janky, but for the most part, it's still more or less what you would get. And same thing with the agent scores, right? Who's getting those good reviews? Who's getting those bad reviews, right? And we can also kind of start to gamify that. So all this isn't turning everything that you've been doing or you thought about doing on its head. It's really just focusing it. So back to what we were saying during the PowerPoint, which I'll pull back up just for reference, is the first point, which is how does that help you leverage the client relationship? Well, again, if you can't bring that conversation up, if you can't bring that to light, you're going to have a really tough time doing it, right? You're going to have a tough time talking about those KPIs, talking about how to improve it, talking about how to put that into a client talking point. Now, one of the things that I will admit that Smileback is like ridiculously good at that we haven't even tried to touch, which is like kudos to you, is the next point on marketing and sales. Both myself and Seth, who is on the call, but silent and deadly, are marketing people. In the previous life, we're both, I was a creative director. I believe Seth was SEO, SEM strategist, and pretty much creative director as well. So we're both kind of like up there. And we know how much of a pain and difficult it is to break into the marketing thing, especially for MSPs. So one of the things that I review you guys for is you guys have cracked the code on how to turn the experience not just into a internal thing, but like even like your web widget, right? Because you have that displays the feedback on there. I really like that. I don't know if you have anything to say about that specifically. This is more of just me gushing and complimenting you, but I really enjoy the idea of being able to show that. Yeah.
I can also some color though how we came to that, which is might be interesting for those in the call. I also like that you called Seth silent but deadly. I feel like there's two things that are silent but deadly, Seth and farts. But yeah, so we've been really building out this part over this part of leveraging Smileback over the last couple of years as we started to notice from our own research, from our own thinking about how can we design a product that's more valuable to MSPs, and also just from listening to MSPs, not only our own customers, but on other webinars where marketing and sales is a real challenge, especially in businesses that are like MSPs that organic referrals tend to be the largest channel often for new business. And so we've realized that having these proof points, this social proof, which is again something that came from the B2C world with your, Google's, TripAdvisors, Booking, like all this stuff, right? Everyone expects there to be social proof in the form of star ratings or some sort of rating and people saying whether they like something or not. That's now expected in the business world as well. And while Smileback can't necessarily generate leads, it can help, or any feedback system for that matter, can help you close leads by doing things like putting the widget on your website. And I actually want to speak to our CSAT score for a sec, back to what you're saying about negative reviews. Sure. But yeah, so these are CSAT scores that we're showing, and Eben Marks, that he's a real guy. He's sitting right beside me. He's waving right now. And he just put a thing in the chat, right? But so these are our customers who have worked with Eben, who know him by name, and are saying, great job, here's how you did it on the transactions. We also have an NPS widget, which can be even better for marketing, because while it's great to hear, oh, this specific tech did a good job on this specific thing, NPS tends to deliver much broader comments that are about your business itself. So you imagine I'm a prospect, I'm thinking about adopting Smileback, and I see, oh, I've been using Smileback to improve my operations, I've become more efficient, and my clients are happier. Or CloudRadial does X, Y, and Z. MSP Bob does X, Y, and Z, as opposed to just at the tech level. So the NPS can be a very powerful thing for generating testimonials that can serve as social proof that can help you land more business. NPS can also be a great opportunity to identify case studies. And this also helps organic growth, because you can collaborate with your partners, you can build a great case study that both of you can use, and then you can serve that on your website and to prospects to get an understanding of how someone like them would use your service. And I think the general theory in business today is that that can be one of the deciding factors, and that for prospects to be able to put themselves into the mindset of this is what it's going to feel like. This is going to be the lived experience of working with this provider, especially a provider in technology, which is an inherently uncertain and highly specialized field, when they have the confidence and the trust built through seeing these testimonials or through these case studies from other people just like them. It's a very powerful tool. And we had a lot of MSPs just asking us, because we've had these customers for such a long time, like, is there anything you guys can do? And so we've really been building this out and focusing on this part of the business. But as you said earlier, you need that foundational feedback collection mechanism, because the more feedback you're getting at scale, the more opportunities you have to get these testimonials, the more opportunities you'll identify in order to make case studies. And it's much better to just have that data there, have those things there for you to mine, than it is to be constantly trying to go out and get those things. It's just more efficient, it's faster, it's easier, it's better. And yeah, just to loop back, if you can see our CSAT score right there, this is in real time, is 87.9. That's actually not a very good CSAT score. And it's, but that's because recently we've had a few neutral and negatives. And I actually think neutral and negatives are a more important, more useful information to get, because when you get that sort of feedback, that's where you see the opportunities for change. And so having a lot of negatives doesn't necessarily mean you're doing a bad job. It means that there's opportunities to improve. And so it's really important when you have that transparency with your clients, that something like CloudRadial can provide, that you don't treat negative as bad, that you treat negative as opportunity, because then your clients are more likely to give you that feedback, because they don't feel like they're punishing an individual, and your techs don't feel like they're going to be punished for getting a negative, because it doesn't necessarily mean bad. And so I just always like to point that out, because sometimes you can create a culture that is not conducive to improvement and opportunity.
Yeah, I've seen that personally, where it's just like we're so focused on getting the 100 that it's, and we've actually run into that internally ourselves, where there was a while back, probably about a year or so ago, in CloudRadial zone support, that we were so obsessed with just being able to get the fastest close times and everything. We kind of just left the personability and like focus on the actual core thing out, right? So we're just so convinced in doing that. And I agree. I mean, it's like you really want to use this as an opportunity to build. But I wanted to speak to that a little bit more, because again, it's near and dear to my heart, like very much so, because I spent the better part of 3 years doing stuff for MSP specifically as far as marketing, everything from email campaigns to I used to manage the pay-per-click to I did a website copy. I mean, I've done every type of conceivable events, all the types of marketing stuff. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but time and time again, the thing that ends up being the best ROI for the least effort is word of mouth, is referrals, is all that kind of stuff. So to me, MSPs are really, really freaking great at getting their clients to like them and getting them to generate some good stuff. And I think this is like, it almost feels to me like if you're not doing something like this, I won't say we ought to do this, but this is like leaving money on the table if you're not leveraging that. Because on one hand, again, this is why I really like your, especially the website thing, is yeah, sales funnel wise, you're talking about people that are prospects, people that are on your site, people that are perusing you, people that are considering going with you. And this can make the entire difference between somebody going, I don't know, to someone going, real people use them. Okay, cool. I can kind of get an idea of it, like you were saying. And then to jam my own CloudRadialisms into it, I think that has to continue internally as well. So this is the external, again, kind of higher up on the funnel. Once they're actually part of your team, right? They're part of your clientele. I think having that ability to be able to see that and be able to view that actionability and kind of get this, again, you'll have to forgive my mediocre feedback charts, but this is another strong point, because you really never know, although you kind of do, that whenever someone's looking around, right, when businesses speak to each other, who do you use for IT, who do you use for this, like one of the things they'll be able to do if you give them that ability is they'll be able to show them what they get. And if they don't have anything experience-wise, it's going to be really hard to translate that. What are they going to do? Send you reports and stuff? Again, if you're casually showing a friend, it's really easy when you log in and you go, here's how it works for me, here's what we get to see, and they can even show this off, right? Like they have the entire experience at their fingertips to talk about it. So it becomes just as important for a word of mouth marketing piece internally as it does externally. And that's where I think there's a really strong case for Smileback and CloudRadial together, because that comes together. And again, from a marketing and sales perspective, you just can't beat this. You're not doing anything extra. You're just making what you do currently visible. So that's, a lot of people prefer to do that, because again, I've acquired lists, I've done all that stuff. It takes a lot of effort and it's always a gamble. You just really don't know if it's going to pay off or not. much safer to
Yeah,
go with your stuff. Yeah.
and it's more efficient. It's cheaper.
For sure.
I mean, it's not necessarily the fastest way to grow, from what I understand from the marketing world, and that's not my jam. But at Smileback ourselves, our marketing budget is strictly for events. That's the only thing we spend on. Everything else is organic, and it is a way to sustainably grow and to identify the right customers to invest time in. Because it's much more efficient from a marketing standpoint and a funnel standpoint to get someone who's a referral than it is to try to bring a lead, or a whatever's before lead, a prospect, or I don't know how all that funnel stuff works, but the earliest touch point, that's a lot of effort, that's a lot of time, that's a lot of dollars, where if you're just getting people further down the funnel, it's much more efficient in terms of investment in every perspective. And it really depends on how you want to grow your business, right? If you want rapid growth, really big growth, you definitely need bigger marketing dollars, budgets, advertising, those kind of things. But this can be a way to fuel your organic growth efforts, and they can even happen, in the background. Sometimes we have people subscribe to Smileback, and we don't even know where they came from. Just all of a sudden they're there. Rory, who's our head of sales, was like, "Hey, we just got a customer. I didn't even talk to him," which is amazing, right? Is that someone just said, "Hey, you should use Smileback," and then they just signed up on the spot. So that's pretty incredible.
Well, I think the reputation, you can't underestimate how much it might precede you. And that's the thing. It's again, especially for those that have ever tried or wanting to get into or ever tried like a pay-per-click campaign, whether it's Google ads or Bing ads or whatever, this stuff is really critical because again, I've suffered from this myself when I used to run the ads and stuff, that whenever you might have a very successful marketing campaign, and ultimately, especially to prospects and stuff, as it relates to bringing them in and just getting them there, like that's a challenge, and you're going to be spending some money to do that. If they get to wherever the destination is, maybe a landing page, maybe the homepage, whatever, and they get turned off, then you'll have wasted essentially all of your effort and time. So it's in your best interest to try to build as many of these, I won't say like, methods, but more of the, like, it's, if you think of like an investment, you're hedging your bets, you're putting as much stock in as multiple different investments as possible. Again, PPC, pay-per-click, email campaigns, doing your testimonials and stuff. So when they land there, they have the complete package experience, and it doesn't feel like they went from something that promised them something, and then they go there and they go, well, I guess I have to now gamble a multi-$1,000 investment on something that I think might work, right? You really want to put their mind at ease. And again, I really truly believe that with some feedback, especially with Smileback stuff, it works really well. And again, even more so whenever you can put that in the portal. But obviously, this isn't really feasible. This is really like what kind of what Andrew was saying. This is the behind the scenes. This is a lead that you might not even know coming, that so-and-so talked to so-and-so, showed them the portal, showed them the idea. Now they have an idea of how to go with you. And because you made it so easy and transparent, that's appealing to people. People don't really like to not know what they're getting into. So lots of really good ramifications from a marketing and sales perspective. And then the last bit, let's talk about that, because we kind of dipped into this and we dipped out, and we'll touch on that, is operations, right? And we know the people that attend to the webinars, we know the people that look at this, and it's like we got a mixed bag. Sometimes it's the technicians and the more technical people themselves looking to understand how these connections work and all that kind of stuff. And to those people too, it's about, again, not taking something and adding to the workload and making this nuts and making this just another thing they have to manage. It's about automating the process. It's about, again, building that pipeline, whether it's internal for your own technicians, if it's for sales, and making sure that fits. And I think again, I'll say it again because I really enjoyed that. Like what Andrew was saying, don't let the positives and negatives consume you as far as like a goal. Like the internal culture should not just be everybody get positives or else, right? So there's a lot of stuff there too that needs to be said. I usually hand it over to Andrew. I want to talk about one of the things that he said too, in terms of reporting, because you had mentioned that you guys generate some reports, and as far as I understand, and I feel like I understand pretty good, CloudRadial is really just pulling in the feedback itself from Smileback. And obviously, we are able to generate reports off that ourselves natively, right? We have the dashboards, we have the feedback. There's some reports you could run natively within CloudRadial, but one of the things you can do as well, and for those thinking about it, right, don't feel limited by what the portal's inherent capabilities are, right? Especially with something like this, think about what you genuinely need to build these workflows, build these processes, even for operations sake. And if there's something that we don't necessarily do, one of the things I urge you guys to think about, again, we're going to use the reports that Andrew is mentioning as an example, even though there may not be a direct API integration with your reports, naturally go there. with some clever automation, there's a way that you can go, it's actually under compliance and reports, and put in reports from any specific source. So in this case, if you were to generate some Smileback stuff, if you were to want to integrate something that, again, we don't natively do, you could always spin up a folder within CloudRadial, right? You could always put alert triggers and all that kind of stuff. Not that you would have to. This is just a place to put your reports of any type. And once you're in the folder for the given client, again, in terms of enhancing that transparency, in terms of making your operational flow easier, whether you're adding these reports, whatever file type they may be, HTML, directly in here, or every one of these folders you create for every single client is going to have a completely unique email. So the point is, you would be able to go ahead and just send whatever you have directly in here. So all of a sudden, again, strategically, operationally, you are really trying to tie everything together. So for your client experience, you're trying to make it so everything feeds in without you having to constantly remember to do this. So this is my own contribution to this challenge, because again, I mostly deal with this on my side doing the professional services, which is how do I take this monster of stuff we do and turn it into this really slim, lean, easy to understand, easy to make actionable client experience. And there's some stuff here, but I think if you can do that, again, operationally, if the goal is to try to build some automation, build some workflows, the goal is to try to make this stuff transparent and build a plan from it, right? What are we doing? What are we not doing? And keep that relationship going. I don't know if you have anything specific on that, Andrew, because I know I mostly deal with this in terms of big CloudRadial, but do you have anything you'd like to say, speaking specifically to operational stuff as far as processes and whatnot you can do within Smileback?
Yeah, sure. I mean, actually, that what you just showed me, I'd never seen that before. That's really cool. Because as to Linwood, and then Billy had a thing in the chat here about, he has a similar sort of request on automation. When Smileback built this out just for our integration, we could just use those email addresses as a recipient of the automation. And so it could be, client email addresses, it could be the email address in the CloudRadial portal, it could be anywhere. And so that our users just identify, all the locations where they want a report to be sent, set it and forget it. And so every month or however, whatever the cadence is, it just shows up in that reporting area and it's totally visible for CloudRadial or people who have clients on CloudRadial, which is really cool. So that was really interesting. And that gives me an idea, and I will look back at this recording and add that to our product roadmap. But the fundamental point, I think, is, and this is again something we've learned over time as we've been building our product, is that feedback can be a very useful way to influence operations. That isn't always intuitively obvious. I think the intuitively obvious piece is automation, right? Is that you want to have products, technology, platforms that minimize the amount of effort, especially with routine tasks that human beings have to do. So you want your feedback specifically to have some sort of automated work done on it when you've built processes in your business processes for how to handle things. When you get negative feedback, you have this process. So these things should just happen automatically in the technology without a human touching them. That's important. When you get a review with a marketing permission that you can use on your website, you want to be alerted of that, or you want that to be displayed on the website widget. All these things are automated, and the more automations you create, based on smart business processes, the less work you have to do, the more your tech stack does work for you. And obviously CloudRadial is invested in that, we're invested in that, and we have a lot of automations that support that workflow, or all those workflows, and most of the products in the space do, which is great. It's all about trying to utilize them to their maximum potential and building as many of these as you think of these business processes into your tech stack. I think the interesting part, though, and what we've learned more and more about through seeing how some of our users use the product, is seeing that all these different touch points give different data, and that can help you identify problems in your workflows, in your business processes. So if you're getting critical feedback repeatedly in very specific areas, that suggests to you, oh, I can be more efficient. My operations could be better if I spend some, human capital on how do I fix this problem? How do I make this process better? Not just whatever that individual piece of feedback is speaking to. And so that's been really interesting, where we see really sophisticated users look at all their touch points, all their journeys, and then use feedback to measure the efficacy of those processes, the efficiency of those processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the other things that you had mentioned earlier that I want to touch on too is that I find that gathering this information, especially, like, obviously I'm more focused on the end user client side of it, but gathering it for them is obviously very important. But I see this mistake happen a lot with a lot of people, which is they interject these reports at the wrong time in the relationship. So a good example of that, and this is not a smile back thing, this is just in general. Take something like backup reports, something like that, that may be pretty thorough, may be interesting to some people, maybe not interesting to others. I see this happen, that like just because something can be forwarded, can be automated, doesn't necessarily mean it has to. And what I see people doing is they go, I do this, I render this service, I want to share it with the client. I've set up an automation that once a week, every Monday, it sends the reports over to the CEO. It's in their inbox, right? Well, again, while that's not inherently incorrect, because you're doing on paper, it sounds right. You go, I'm sending them stuff, improving and all that stuff. It might come at an inopportune time. So that might be when they're busy, when they don't want to see it and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's not a stretch. It's not particularly bold to say that I think the better idea in general is, whether it's CloudRadial or in general anything else, having a repository where, yes, you have your automation, but the time and place makes sense. Where the report archives, I'm a big fan of these because they solve that issue. They're solving the issue where you may be doing, I mean, this is a demo account with 11 separate things potentially going on. You solve the issue that the time and place doesn't necessarily have to matter. If the client wants to see these things, they have availability 24/7. They have all the power in the world to control that. If they don't have to. But more importantly, for your own internal operations, right? When you start doing that audit, that strategic discussion internally for your own operations, not only do you have visibility to see that both in Smileback and in CloudRadial in various ways, but when you sit down to do that QBR, when you sit down to do the discussion, you're not coming at the client blindsided, having to throw up a bunch of different things and show them this site, log into this portal, whatever. The idea is that you may be doing all these different things, but again, you're focusing it down. So I can rifle through all the Smileback reports I have, and I can show them exactly the history. And I'm never going to get caught in that, well, we pay you for so-and-so, we don't even know. Or I don't know, I deleted that, I didn't see it, right? So there's an art to managing how much stuff you're doing for them, scrapping out the non-necessary stuff and putting it in here. And again, to me, from what I see from people, that's the operational flow I see a lot of like account manager types want, because it's also a nightmare for most of them to gather the information to run that QBR, to just find those discussion points tool by tool. It's really kind of annoying. So this solves kind of a couple different operational points, I think, that I've struggled with myself. So good stuff. We always appreciate a good report email or anything that comes through. Let me see. Do I have any more talking points? I think I'm out of juice. I think the next one I have is the questions. So I don't know if we have anything else, Seth, that you would like to say since you popped back on camera.
Yeah, no, you guys pretty much covered everything live during the webinar, but I would just pipe in as, someone who did SEO professionally for 7 years,
yes.
Marketing director for an MSP for 3 years. It's a really, not news to anybody probably on this webinar, extremely difficult place to market within. One of the reasons is it's a pretty serious relationship. I think in the MSP world, they call it a proposal for a reason. You're kind of proposing marriage, and it sometimes can help to go on a few dates, a couple break fix dates, and build that trust. But when you're just trying to sell an MSP relationship right out of the box, it really helps if there's a couple of their friends that are talking you up, and that's exactly what Smileback can help with, and why we think all of our partners should have a tool like that to capture that sort of information as best as you can, because that's how you get credit for it. It's nice to get that phone call from a customer when they're super excited about what you're doing, makes you feel good, but how can you turn that into money? That's exactly what Smileback helps you do.
Right.
Yeah, and we've learned too from different customers that, and even our own, is also, especially with NPS, right? They're saying, how likely are you to recommend? That's the question. So there's people who are literally putting up their hand and saying, we'd love to recommend you. And it's all about just actually following up on that and saying, oh, great, you would like to recommend us. Can you recommend us? And it really does pay off there, because you're getting economies of scale with this one asset, I guess we could call it, where it's on the website as a proof point. So exactly you're describing. My understanding also is testimonials help with SEO in some like magical voodoo way. And then you also can use it to actually ask people for referrals and then use it in a case study. So you start to see that just this one asset becomes very powerful in your content marketing kind of arsenal, because you can use the one thing to create multiple assets. So even your content marketing starts to become more efficient. And I mean, obviously you need people and the thinking to know how to do this. But I think it can get pretty interesting as people get more and more sophisticated, because you certainly don't need to do all those things at once. You just need to start with one thing.
What it does is it supplies an organic conversation about the things you're doing and and who you're doing them for, right? I mean, that's the basics of SEO. You need to have content on your website about what you want to do and who you want to do it for. But when you have those people continually adding content, it can be really hard to add content to your website. How much more can you say about what you do at some point after you've done a website? They just layer on that iterative content that looks organic to a search engine for sure, because it is.
Yeah, and again, I'll emphasize that part of especially like the NPS stuff. That's like we've suffered from that ourselves. It's like the money left on the table where it's like you're too busy. Again, I know I've talked to these people, and everyone on this call does. You're so busy, you're so tapped on time. There's tools to set up. There's emergencies. There's trouble clients. There's good clients that you really don't have time for most people to have an account manager or somebody designated as such to go through person by person. Would you recommend this? What do you think? What do you think? So having that automation in play, we can just pick that up and use that it's like you can probably quantify that in hours saved. I think it's nuts. And it's one of those things that, again, if you're on the growth path, especially, like I know we've talked about this as far as client retention, client appreciation, there's a lot of that, but even just strictly speaking for growth, it's kind of a critical piece. I think it's kind of
it's one of the biggest stumbling blocks. It's one of the hardest things as like a marketing director, at an MSP where you don't necessarily interface with the clients. Like it's the raw material that you need to work with, and the one thing you can't get. So anything you can do to actually get that on board is really helpful.
Well, right on. Well, I think we probably answered all the questions, but yeah, I wanted to just close up with this, right? We have the contacts, right? We've got Rory and Evan at smileback.com. We got of course, you can book a demo directly there, kind of similar for us. We got info at CloudRadial, and then we have cloudradial.com/demo to take a look at what we can do as a whole. But I don't believe there's any other questions. If there are, please feel free to ask. But in any case, thank you so much, Andrew, for hopping on and doing this with us. And thank you, Seth, for being cool the whole time. All right.
My pleasure. And, thank you.
You guys have a good rest of your day, and thanks for joining, guys. Catch you around.
Ciao.